Let's take a moment and review what we learned in class today about the nature of science. Our learning targets were to explain what science is, to describe the characteristics of a scientist, and to define and identify empirical evidence. You should be feeling pretty comfortable with those by the end of the slideshow, where you're getting close to a 3, if not a 4. We will be practicing these more in class. You had a chance to read an article called Character Witness, and as you read, we highlighted and underlined some information, and you had the opportunity to define the vocabulary words science and empirical evidence. The definition of science was the systematic study of natural events and conditions. In case you didn't know what systematic meant, that means done according to a fixed plan or system. In science, there are a series of steps that we take when we're going through trying to find the answer to a question, and we call that a systematic study. You then defined this in your own words and included some examples. Empirical evidence is when we're including observations and measurements obtained through study, experiment, and research. We went ahead and defined that in our own words and included some examples. Some of the examples we went over were on the next slide here, where they talked about how the sun will rise tomorrow. We know this because we see it rise every day. And another example would be reading the temperature on a thermometer. It's going to say the same thing no matter who is looking at it. You took some time to sketch your idea and interpretation of a scientist and give some adjectives to describe that person. And most people tend to think of the typical little picture here of a scientist. But we learned that there is a wide array of different professions out there in the scientific realm that people will go and pursue as a career. And all of these scientists do have some similar characteristics in common. The characteristics of scientists include curiosity. Most discoveries come from asking why or how. Even Albert Einstein recognized this, saying that he has no special talent, he's just passionately curious. Creativity uses imagination to come up with new solutions. There is a list there of some characteristics of creative people. Take a look at that and see if you fall into any of those categories. Logic is reasoning through information using evidence. If you're familiar at all with Spock, you know that he is a very logical person and really doesn't show any emotion about things, just very logical. Must have evidence. Skepticism. Don't believe everything you hear or read. You guys spend a lot of time on the computer, on YouTube, watching videos, looking at different articles that you come across on the computer. Be very careful of what you will believe and what you don't believe. Make sure that people have evidence to back up their claims. A lot of photoshopping out there these days. So don't be so gullible as to believe everything you hear or read. Make sure that people have evidence to back up their claims. I will ask this of you too if you share some interesting things in class that maybe you saw or read. I'll ask you what evidence there was to support those ideas. Objectivity is another quality of a scientist. This is where we have to set aside personal beliefs and we have to set aside our personal feelings about things when we're conducting research in order to be honest and to put forth the best quality product for our peers to review and to look over before we publish. We can't let our personal bias in on the experiment. You can see the fellow on the left here has some bias. He went in expecting certain results from his experiment and decided to throw it away because it went against what he wanted his data to show. That is not good science. That will get found out by the peer review committees, and this person probably won't have a job if he gets found out about doing that. So we have to be honest. We have to report things honestly. So in class, if something doesn't go your way the way you think it's going to go, it doesn't mean that it's wrong. It's just what happened, and we just report on it. So let's review your learning targets one more time. By now you should be able to explain what science is. You should be able to describe the characteristics of a scientist, And you should be able to define and identify empirical evidence. We'll be working on identifying empirical evidence more in class.